Welcome to Globespan. I am Paul near Tennessee of Guyana, and today we have a very interesting subject we are discussing. Will all Guyanese benefit from the promise of the new economy? And today we have some very important guests. My co-host, Professor Floyd Haynes, who is a businessman, academic, and president of the Roraima Institute. I also have today Timothy Jonas, senior counsel and chair of a new and united Guyana, ANUG. And we also have a very long history as a politician, Mr. Aubrey Norton. He is a PNC executive member, and he comes with a lot of experience from the politics of Guyana, and has been always very active, very outspoken about his views, both within and outside the PNC. Gentlemen, welcome to the program.
Thanks, Paul.
Thank you very much, Paul.
I am going to start now by the conversation by asking each one of you to comment first on the following. What is the new economy that is evolving in Guyana or that will evolve in Guyana? Aubrey, you want to give it a shot?
Well, I think I lost contact with you just now and I didn't hear what you said.
So I introduce you as a very experienced politician with many years in the political life of Guyana, and that you were an executive member of the People's National Congress. And I also asked, since we are dealing with the subject, will all Guyanese benefit from the promise of the new economy? If each one of you, first of all, if we could start the conversation by each one of you commenting on what is this new economy? Is it evolving or is it something in the future? What is the new economy in Guyana?
Well, the first thing I would say is that I am not inclined to look at an economy by itself. I believe in political economy. That is to say that while there is economic activity, there is a role for politics, and in the process, it is political decisions that can be critical in terms of where the economy goes. And so I would prefer to see a kind of a symbiotic relationship between politics and economy and discuss from that standpoint rather than by the economy itself.
Okay. Well, I'm currently teaching global political economy, and I know you were formerly a lecturer at the University of Guyana, so I understand where you're coming from, and that's wonderful. Timothy, would you like to comment on that, or
The
new economy?
We are on the cusp of the unknown, so we don't know how it's going to evolve. We tend to speak in abstracts. So Aubrey said, politics influences the economy. Of course, politics influences the economy. I think the question is, how do we hope the politicians will make their decisions and direct their policies so as to foster the economy? And I think we can anticipate the central largest area of spendable money will be from the revenues and royalties paid into the tax coffers of the government. And the question is that going to be siphoned off for personal aggrandizement and political means, or is that going to be redeployed into the economy, into the production sectors, so that we see economic growth? And how is that going to be done? So we got two options. We got corruption and going down the road that we've seen places like Nigeria go, or we've got proper investment of the revenues which will be earned and go down the road of Ghana and Norway. Those are the two options.
So Floyd, what is your take on this?
I think, if I may rephrase the question slightly, I think the real question is, will Guyana benefit from the promise of a new economy and by extension its citizens? I agree with Aubrey that that politics is part and parcel of economics, and so we have to talk about the political economy. That is that goes without saying. However, the promise of the future, or the future, is filled with promises of all kinds of good things. It's also fraught with uncertainty. And so you've got these two roads, to quote Robert Frost, you've got these two roads that can diverge. And the question for us is, which one of those roads will we go down? To answer that question, I think you have to look at all of the actors that are involved. That is not just a question for government. It is a question for the opposition. It is a question for the Guyanese electorate. All of these groups working in tandem. No one group by itself can determine Guyana's future as it relates to the new economy. And by the new economy, let's call it what it is. It's the oil. It's revenues from the oil find. For Guyana to realize maximum benefit, there must be a functional or a functioning government, an engaged and vigilant opposition, and I want to say an engaged civil society, but I think the model for civil society to engage is terribly flawed. I would prefer to see a representative democracy whereby you can hold members of parliament accountable. If you live in Safai, or you live in Kitty, or you live in Annandale or Buxton, and your representative is not doing your bidding, then you can remove him. We don't have such a system. And so it then falls on various civil society organizations to be actively engaged. In the final analysis, all of those various groups that I've mentioned have to be engaged in moving the country forward.
Okay, so this oil economy is, and well, let's put it this way. We have had a government for 8 months, and they have been implementing a number of policies, and they have a budget, and they have allocated resources in various sectors. And one of them significantly appears to be the infrastructure of the country. Do you all believe that the allocations for infrastructure and housing and so forth is going to impact on the traditional economy to the point that there will be some kind of transformation also in the traditional economy? Or do you believe the oil economy and the oil sector will remain isolated from the rest of the economy in the context of the kind of vision and policies that the current government is pursuing? Aubrey, what is your view on that?
Well, first of all, I don't see the two things running in the way they are seeing it. First, I think that one has to look at the society in context. When one contextualizes Guyana, Guyana does not have a civil society like the developed world. Guyana, another characteristic of Guyana is that it's divided down the center. And even those who purported to be opposition, some of them have merged with the People's Progressive Party, and they do not stand up against wrongdoing. I think in one case, there might have been one person speaking out. So I'm suggesting here that you don't have the counterbalancing forces in the way developed Western European and North American societies have them. And to that extent, what in essence happens is that there are openings for corruption, there are openings for self-aggrandizement. And if one looks at the history of the existing government, there is not much hope because it has been a history of corruption. Added to that, while there is a budget, one does not see any semblance of a comprehensive program aimed at the development of Guyana. For instance, from the policies outlined, one cannot decipher what is the human resource development plan. And if you look at societies, one of the critical variables in their development is the strong human resource development base. Singapore is a clear case. And so one has to be concerned that without such a structured approach to development, one is likely to see the corruption, etc., and the real areas that the resources should go into, they don't. Let's take agriculture. We do not see any plan that suggests there's going to be a comprehensive approach to agriculture in which you identify areas of comparative advantage, geographical areas with advantages, and develop those industries, the agriculture, and then link to industry, link to international markets, so that we can see that there is a holistic plan going forward. What you are seeing are some, what I would call spasmodic comments on certain ventures, but there is no evidence of a holistic approach that will integrate, say, crop and livestock with other areas of agriculture and then link those to industry, so that you begin the process of shifting away from being a primary resource-based economy. And to me, that is critical. If you can continue in agriculture, you can plow in infrastructure, but if you don't develop your human resource capacity, you don't develop your industrial base, then there is every possibility that you utilize your oil resources and it does not give you the kind of development that is needed at this stage. And like I've said, I've seen no evidence or an interest in that kind of development, which is critical to the development of Guyana. With the absence of a proper governance culture, a good governance culture, and we shouldn't fool ourselves, we don't have a good governance culture. We don't have a culture in which consensus, compromise and consensus are sought. And so there is a mechanism for moving forward. What we have is what I think the Speaker of the House said once: you have your say and we will have our way. And once you go down that road, you create tensions in the society, and you will not likely realize your development objectives. You know, Guyana can benefit also, and the people don't benefit. Guyana meaning the resources come to the country, but it is concentrated in the hands of a few, and the masses of the society do not benefit in the way that they should. So to me, if we take a particular approach of a comprehensive with proper governance structures and the removal of discrimination and the promotion of a meritocracy, we stand a chance. But the history of political economy in Guyana doesn't suggest that that's the way we will go.
Timothy, what's your reaction to the views expressed by Mr. Norton?
I agree with a great deal of what Aubrey says. First of all, the private sector is not independent, has never been independent. The reason for that is that in our small economy, where the largest contractor is the government, the largest employer is the government, there is necessarily a dependency on the government. So if you want to pretend that you're going to make a dollar honestly and still be politically independent, you're either lying or you're fooling yourself. So there's no real autonomy in the private sector, and we've seen that. Because the government controls, Aubrey again is right. And in this, I am sad to say I disagree with Floyd. I don't often disagree with Floyd. When he talks about the opposition playing a part, what part do you play when the other side has more votes than you in parliament and the other side has government? What you have is an elected dictatorship. And therefore, as Aubrey says, you gleefully and smugly get to say, you have your say and I have my way. We're a part company with Aubrey is that this didn't start in 1992. This existed in the 70s, this existed in the 80s, this existed in the 90s, and this followed suit 2015 to 2020 in spades. So there is a problem in the country, and the smiling, you have your way, you have your say, we have our way, has endured throughout, and we are second poorest to Haiti because we have had a chronology, a sequence of corruption and incompetence and interference, and corruption and incompetence and interference sequentially all down the line.
Floyd, what's your take?
Except to say, Timothy, I never said it started in 1992.
Yeah, well, I mean, first of all, let me clarify certain things. When I say if Guyana benefits, its citizens benefit, I am thinking of this very differently than perhaps Aubrey would have thought. When I say Guyana benefit, I don't equate that to a few dollars in a few people's pocket. That's not Guyana benefiting. For Guyana to benefit, you would have to see an improvement in healthcare, an improvement in education, an improvement in the delivery of public goods and services, jobs, houses, all of those types of things. When we begin to see those types of things, then you know the country is on the right track. And if those things happen, then by extension, the citizens benefit. That's first of all. Second point is corruption didn't start. Corruption in Guyana cannot be tagged to any one political party or group. Cannot be. Let he who is without sin cast the first stone. I have the moral authority. I can speak. Corruption cannot be tagged to any one group. When Group A gets in power, they haul Group B in front of the courts. When Group B gets in power, they haul Group A in front of the courts. We've seen it back and forth. Let the courts decide. I'm not the attorney on this show. And I think there is a plan. But it's we, the Guyanese people, that have to demand accountability. Tim is right. We have a system that doesn't allow for an effective opposition. However, the opposition represents a significant voting bloc in that country. It is a non-trivial number, and it's for the opposition to determine how best they use that and leverage that to make their point. They have to come up with their strategy. You can, if you just take the position, well, it's what's it, my way, you say my way, that type of thing, well, then we should pick up our bat and ball and go home. I don't think that's the approach. I think you have to find a way. I am not in government or in opposition, so it isn't my job to come up with a way. But I insist, if Guyana is going to move forward as a nation, it will not do so with any one group in its entirety. It has to be all deck on board, all hands on board. And that's what I would like to see. I think there is some attempt at things like human capital development. There's some attempt to merge some of the stuff at UG with UE. Exxon has contributed money to fund certain additional departments at UG. So there are some things, and I think there can be more. The real question is, will those monies and those efforts be effectively managed? And for that to happen, I don't think you could sit back on the outside and look in and say, well, they're going to mess it up. I think you have a responsibility as politicians to ensure that those things are done appropriately.
So the sense I'm getting is that there is some kind of consensus that since political independence to now, we seem to be on a treadmill on all of these issues. They're recurring, they're still there, and they have not been able to effectively address the fundamental problems in Guyana. I want to suggest to you all that one of my observations looking at the political history of Guyana or the history of the political economy is that the culture, the political culture of Guyana was not incubated in liberal democracy, but political parties that were committed to Marxism, Leninism, and dictatorship, concepts of dictatorship, party paramountcy, and that sort of thing in the 80s. And because of that, it seems to me until now, there seemed to be no decision, for example, and I'm going to be frank here, with the PNC regarding their role in the parliament. There is a position that is very difficult in a liberal democracy where you go in the parliament, you collect the wages, and then you say, I don't recognize the government or the president. No, in the 80s, when I did not recognize the dictatorship, I worked on the outside. I never supported the idea that under that dictatorship you should work in the parliament. But the PNC and the APNU, AFC, is in the parliament, but then they are saying that they do not recognize the government. So that's outside of the liberal democratic system. So what kind of political system is that? And how are we going to get this consensus and this dialogue? Evidently, Aubrey is a very intelligent man. He's learned and he's experienced in the politics in Guyana, and he knows the political base of the PNC. He knows it. He's always been a guy who interacted with that base. So Aubrey, I want to ask you,
Paul, let me ask a question.
What political system do we have there now?
Paul,
Yeah.
I was going to ask a question because I'm curious and I didn't want to forget it. Aubrey says he's not hopeful based on what he sees. Guyana has discovered oil. It's about 6 years now. Did your hopelessness start 8 months ago or 6 years ago when we discovered oil?
Well, first of all, if you would listen to me, I didn't pin anything on oil. I looked first at our history. Unfortunately, my friend Mr. Jonas tagged me at 1992. I never did. I said that based on the political history of Guyana, and I didn't pin it on any political party. If anybody follow my writings on governance, you will see I am critical of all sides. When I'm doing
but my question is, did you have this sense of hopelessness in 2016?
In 2016? Yes.
Okay, that's fair.
But let me tell you why. I am one who have always argued that unless you find, first of all, you have a change in the political culture, one, and two, you have some system of a governance that allows each and every sector or ethnic group to feel part and parcel of the administration of Guyana. We are not likely to go anywhere. Those of you who follow my academic writing know I am a protagonist in large measure of some form of inclusive governance. And I do believe that if you do not solve the political problem, you will have difficulties realizing the dream. Let me give you a practical example.
I agree with you 100% there.
Let me give you a practical example. For years, we talk about a road from Lethem coming through Linden to Georgetown. We have long identified how strategic geographically Linden is. We are now hearing of a road that is going to come from Bartica, okay, ending up somewhere in Timeri. Obviously, a section of the society would already feel that that is being done to asphyxiate Linden and Region 10, because by all the studies that were done, this road was going to pass through Linden. And a lot of what is happening there is political rather than rational economic and other analysis.
You had 5 years to build that road. You had 5 years to build that road. Why didn't you build it?
Now, what is the issue here? Are we casting blame? The feasibility study was done for that road. You know it will take time. I am not here getting involved in why it wasn't done in 5 years. I am dealing with an extant reality.
But you are addressing an issue that came on the scene in 8 months, but you're ignoring what happened in 5 years.
I am being a little patient here. I thought this discussion would have been a constructive discussion dealing with these issues holistically. Whether the issue here is where is it most feasible, where will it serve the Guyanese people most, which route, etc. And those have nothing to do with who implemented it or didn't implement it. I recall us in Parliament supporting the Letem to Georgetown Road. But I think you are missing the point, Floyd.
Okay.
You are putting yourself in the political mold of blame. I want us to get out of that mold. We have at our disposal resources to utilize.
Right.
We need a political system that allows all and sundry to feel part and parcel of what is happening.
I agree.
And the decisions that are taken should be taking the interests of Guyana into consideration. No government, I think, in 5 years, and it's not even 5, because I would say 3, could have done the feasibility study, do the road, etc. But I don't want us to go there, because that does not deal with the core problem of finding political solutions. For instance, let's assume we continue down the road you were talking about, and a road starts to come from Bartica, and the government changes. Then what do we do? Stop that road? What we need at this stage is to get together and decide which infrastructure, where these infrastructure will go that will serve Guyana in good stead, and to find some kind of consensus. So even if there is a change in government, there is continuity, because we will end up squandering a lot of resources along the line.
I don't want to take up the conversation.
I wish you would allow me to speak because I allowed you to speak. But go ahead. You go ahead. I'll answer when you're through.
No, I just wanted to be clear. I am totally in agreement with what you're saying. My only issue is that I feel that today, and I felt that 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago. So for me, it isn't one side versus the other. I'm Team Guyana, and I am saying the problem didn't start 8 months ago. And so the analysis cannot begin 8 months ago. And if we're going to be honest.
Who began the analysis 8 months ago?
Well, you're talking about some decision that was made recently.
I am saying to you, look, the first time I met you, Floyd, we talk about inclusive governance.
Yeah, I agree.
So it is not anything new that I'm talking about. Now, the point I was trying to make is that political decisions are made not necessarily based on the best information, engineering and otherwise, geography and otherwise. And then when we make those decisions, and there is no consensus, no compromise whatsoever, and a government changes, then you come with a totally new approach. One of the reasons, and the PNC did support a national development strategy, which was drafted by a white cross section of the Guyanese society, unless people forget that. It had included people from the PPP, the WPA, you name them, professionals, and it was put aside. All I'm saying to you here is that for us, for Guyana to benefit and for us to make sense going forward, we need to find some consensus. We need involvement of both sides and the development of a development plan that is comprehensive and is based on proper scientific and other data that should transcend regimes.
Can't argue with that. I cannot argue with that. I fully support that.
Well, regarding this planning and the consensus, I followed and I have all Wilfred David's development plans during the Burnham era. During President Jagdeo's era, I followed very carefully. The Carter Center had come in and had helped to work on a development plan. The World Bank got involved. We were trying to deal with the debt. So I don't think development plans is a problem. The problem is that, you know, you could have once I made a speech that said you could have a vision without implementation is hallucination. And I think that's a point Floyd is getting at. But Aubrey, in all honesty, implicitly what you were suggesting when you suggested about the redirection of the road is that the PPP government is deliberately discriminating against people of Linden, who we all know are people of African origin. And is that what you're saying?
I am saying that, but I am also saying if the decision was based on science, geography, engineering, etc., and part of a wider development strategy, that will never be the place where the road will go. The road will be the same Lethem to Georgetown, and then they could have been cut off areas out of Bartica coming. But the point I'm making here is that politics is determining infrastructure rather than science, engineering, etc. And whether we like it or not, that is going to be one of our downfall, because we will end up with governments changing, plans changing, and we're going nowhere. I recall when the APNU AFC came to government, there was a lot of debate on which program should go forward with and which shouldn't. And many of them went forward. Those that weren't felt feasible, etc., didn't go forward. Now, we have got to recognize that that cannot work. The PPP will go at some stage. The APNU, PNC, or whoever will come. Then they will go, and another one will come. Do we change every time we have some form of regime change? And I am trying to suggest that apart from the political fights, there is need for the development of a culture, a political culture in which we can compromise, find consensus, and on some critical issues, move forward.
Okay.
As a nation.
So I agree with that fully. The question is the how. Timothy, what's your views about the exchange between Aubrey and Floyd on this matter of, and specifically Aubrey's position about the famous road? We're not hearing you, Timothy. Timothy.
Sorry, the one response I would make before I answer substantively is that thankfully these things are recorded. So the reason I started to identify dates pre-92, post-92, pre-2015, post-2015, is that when you check this recording, you will see that the first person here.
Timothy, we didn't hear you. We didn't hear you. We lost you.
Floyd, I'm sorry. Are you hearing me?
Now we hear you, so you have to start from the beginning.
That's interesting. All right. I'm sorry. The one point I would take issue with Aubrey is that he protested about what he saw as Floyd's politicization of the conversation. I agree with him. This conversation needs to discuss solutions, not finger pointing. But when he disagreed with what I said using dates pre-92, post-92, pre-2015, post-2015, fortunately this forum is recorded. And when you check the recording, you will see that the first person in this forum of the four of us who mentioned PPP was Aubrey in his opening answer to you. And that is why I used the dates. Now that being said, everything Aubrey said after that about inclusivity and the need for there to be a consistent, steady, uninterrupted economic policy is absolutely correct. We can point to so many examples where decisions are taken by one of the two parties.
Right.
That the other party says, look, you're discriminating against my people. When they decided where to put the Barbies Bridge, there was a hue and cry because it was bypassed in New Amsterdam. It was said it should have gone further up the Barbies River to include some of those villages that are now starved. Aubrey's now talking about the road that he says asphyxiates Linden. But on the other side, APNU closed Gaisuko. So what happens is we have a tit for tat going down this ugly road that gets worse and worse in Guyana. And what happens? Well, just a minute. You just quarreled with Floyd about interrupting. So allow me to finish if you don't mind.
Yeah.
What happens as we do this tit for tat? We get worse and worse. Because having closed Gaisuko the assets began to deteriorate, and then the PPP said they could resuscitate it, another impossibility. So exactly the principle that Aubrey is talking about is absolutely correct. When they had the sign off with the ExxonMobil, it was paused while PPP reviewed the entire contract before they signed off on it, keeping Exxon holding their breath for about a month. Because when the decisions are made by the people in government, they are made as dictators. They are not made in an inclusive way, which extends a hand to bring in the other side so that decisions can be made rationally with the interests of both sides being discussed. And therefore, with both sides informed, so that even when you have a change of government, the same economic policy is informed to both sides and can move forward seamlessly. That's how it should be done. Inclusivity will reduce corruption. Inclusivity will ensure that there is a seamless continuity of an informed and recognizable policy, not this kind of disjunctive, disjointed system that we have, where you throw out your boys and you put in my boys. And then the other side comes and they throw out their boys and they put in our boys. And we see it in a cycle that is vicious and ugly and polarizes. And both sides are guilty. And then what happens is that when they're in power, they don't make too much noise about this sharing and inclusivity and let's bring in the other side to have this discussion. So that when they're in opposition, you hear that discussion. And both sides are equally responsible and both sides equally culpable in this cycle of harm to Guyana.
And that's the point. That's the point I was trying to make.
Could I respond, since a lot of them were saying one?
Sure.
I'll come to the Gaisuko, which is a bad example. Whether you like the APNU, AFC or not, there are certain things we should acknowledge. First, a procurement commission was put in place to ensure contracts went above board, which was something that was agreed to by both sides. Second, the whole question of Gaisuko should not be seen as tit for tat, because the European Union had signaled their position, gave money to the then government to, and this is before AP and UFC, to realign and do the things that were needed so that sugar workers had alternative jobs, etc. That money was misused. By the time we got into government, Gaisuko was not viable, and it hadn't been viable for years, even periods under the PNC. And so I think Gaisuko is a bad example. I want to point out that when I spoke, I never spoke about a PPP government in 1992. When I spoke in historical terms. If you go to the period, any period after the split in 1955, you will see all the tenets I identified were there. And so to suggest that I tagged it at 1992 is kind of disingenuous. But I would prefer we focus on how will people benefit from this oil economy we're talking about. And the first condition for benefiting is good governance. And if you ask me if I am hopeless, it is because there is no evidence of good governance. And no evidence.
Let me say this, Paul. I mean, listen, nobody. Sorry, Aubrey. Go ahead.
When you finish.
Nobody on this panel is disagreeing that you need good governance and that there is corruption and there is tit for tat. My only point was to put on the table that this has been the history of the country. And if we're going to do the analysis, we have to look at it in totality. In other words, and that's why I ask you the question, you are looking at what is happening now and you are not hopeful. You don't see the plan, you don't see. And I ask you the question, did you feel that same way in 2016? Because I did.
But I've answered that question already. Could I ask you a critical question?
Sure.
How do we have hope when you have a society with a lot of inequalities and there is no equality among non-equals? How do we put a mechanism in place to ensure that the dispossessed get, and that the resources that will come from oil wouldn't go to make the rich richer, the corrupt more corrupt, and the people suffer? And those critical issues can only be dealt with if there is the emergence of a governance system that is propitious to that kind of development. And so one of the unfortunate things is that we cannot discuss this without politics, but we cannot make it only politics. And I have argued long before 2016. I have argued inside my political party, outside the political parties, that one of the fundamental problems is our inability to change the political culture. I also want to make the point that we espouse all these glorious things about democracy, but do we have the structures and the culture for the kind of democracy we're talking about? And until we make those structural changes, the cultural changes, I believe we'll be a hopeless society.
But Aubrey, I'm a bit lost because you are one of the prominent leaders in one of the two most important political parties, not only historically, but now. And I'm disappointed that you are lamenting and you're not proposing. What do you propose? You've been in this business a long time.
Well, I
And
started
you are you're sitting on the executive of one of the most powerful political parties in the country. And what have you proposed to transform the PNC for a start, so that, so that it could have an impact? We speak of inclusivity. What exactly does the PNC mean by inclusivity? And you speak of good governance. What have you proposed? What has the party proposed?
Well, the party's proposals are all in writing in the parliament during the constitutional reform process of 2001, 1998 to 2001. The party made clear proposals. You asked me what have I been doing in the PNC. I want to answer you. The only political party in this country that ever held an independent primary to choose a presidential candidate was the PNC. And it was done because people in the PNC were pushing for change. And so across the country, our party members elected a leader. I am saying to you that that is important, because you said I didn't make suggestions of solution. I did say we need to change the political culture. I did make the suggestion that whatever we do should be based on the science, the geography, objective criteria. So I said the political culture must change. I also suggested that we have nowhere to go unless we can find mechanisms for compromise and consensus.
Okay, what concrete mechanism do you suggest, Aubrey, in the current situation where your party does not recognize the current government as legitimate? How do we go beyond that? Because we seem to be polarized around this, one on one extreme and the other. What do you concretely suggest to the Guyanese people as a Guyanese patriot for us to get out of this conundrum? Because if we don't do that, what are we doing? We're on a treadmill on this issue. We all are intellectually correct. We all, when we're in a discussion, we all agree on inclusive government. We all agree on this. We all agree on that. We agree on the culture. We got to change the culture. But for example, I'm pressing you a little bit because I know that you are an important leader.
Let me answer you. The government, we contend and will always contend, is illegitimate because it came to power on numbers based on a recount that was agreed to by both political parties, and then the goalposts start to move. Now, a government can be illegitimate, but there's still activities in the state. The police got to operate, the public service got to operate, etc. What do we do? First, we have to find mechanisms to speak. And a government being illegitimate or illegitimate does not mean you cannot speak. That's the first point I want to make. The second point I want to make, there can be proper consultations at the level of the budget that will help. You can treat constitutional bodies, and Mr. Jonas will know this in law, as constitutional bodies, and don't attempt to direct them politically and allow them to operate as if we are in a Western liberal democratic state. Then, as it relates to the critical decisions in this country, we can ensure that the political parties meet, discuss, and arrive at consensus position on the critical issues. Why is it? Why is it we can't, as we speak to the oil industry, create a committee of both sides in which there is respect for both sides and there are discussions on arriving at positions that we can take to strengthen our hands. All of that can occur while we say and believe that the government is illegitimate.
Timothy, let me ask Timothy, because he's in the politics too. Timothy, how do you respond to that? Is that the solution for us to go forward, or are we going to be in the conundrum all over again? Do you have an alternative to what Aubrey is suggesting? What would you advise the opposition of Guyana in relation to the current government in order that we could move forward dealing with a new political culture, dealing with new mechanisms of governance? Timothy, what is your view? We've lost you again, Timothy.
Are you hearing me?
Now we're hearing you.
I like your question and I like the point that you make. As long as we speak at a high level, abstract, it's hard to disagree. We need good governance, obviously. We need both sides represented, obviously. We need all Guyanese to be involved, obviously. So you asked the sensible question. How do you propose to accomplish that? And so far, the response that I've heard has been discussion. Talk, hear the other side, reach consensus. That doesn't do it. Because you talk till you're blue in the face. And if you have 33 seats and you have government, you have your say, I have my way. So if your solution after Guyana's 50 years of experience is some kind of whole hands, kumbaya, let's all talk and reach consensus, you fail before you start.
You didn't listen to what I said.
I did, and if you check, you'll see I didn't interrupt, and I'd be grateful if you could return that courtesy. If the intention is that we hold hands and say kumbaya, it will fail. The system must be such that it is mandatory that both sides are involved. And the system must be such that it is mandatory that both sides have the vote. For me, in some of the places where the purse strings are, I would even say that the opposition should have the majority. Because it is where those purse strings are that you need to look for corruption. But Paul, at the end of the day, our experience has shown us that if the party in government also controls parliament, then no law is going to change to enable the opposition from an empowered and serious position to have a real say. We need changes in the legislation to mandate opposition presence on all state boards, opposition presence on all constitutional bodies, and not just one or two. As long as on those state boards and constitutional bodies, the government, whichever government it is, carries the majority, then it continues to be, you have your say, I have my way. Our experience has taught us that. But it will be a step in the right direction because it will be more difficult to have corrupt transactions. If Aubrey Norton is on a state board and he's looking face to face at Barra Jackley on that state board, then any contract awarded by that state board will be a fair contract based on merit, unless both of them hold hands and go down the road corruptly together, which is difficult. You need both sides represented. And if both sides are represented, when the government changes, that state board will remain the same, and therefore the policy will not change, although the government has changed. That is how you get the continuity as far as I can see it. That's the only way you can start, because how the rules of the game are now, because the government in power has total control, they will not change the laws in parliament, and therefore the opposition will not have more power. And the greater question is, how do we effect a change of the legal structure when the government likes the legal structure? Both governments in their respective turn have liked the legal structure.
We tend to have great ideas when we're in the opposition. I don't recall, Aubrey, and if I overlook it, please remind me. I don't recall Aubrey asking for a joint consultation on oil when APNU was in power. And again, I'm not trying to politicize. All I'm saying is that this is precisely what is wrong with Guyana. We have to be consistent in our arguments. And what I'm saying, I love the idea. It's a brilliant idea. Something as important as oil requires all hands on deck. It required it in 2015 when 8 or 9 people flew to Houston. It requires it today. And that's all I'm asking. I am not, and this is the point. This is precisely what is wrong. And on the idea of the legitimacy of the president, I don't have any evidence that the president is illegitimate. Aubrey, I was an observer. I was in the country on election day. I was an observer. If you have evidence, i.e. statement of polls that you would like to share with me, I'd be more than happy to take a look at it. But without the evidence, I think it's unfair to make that accusation.
I hope you're in this world because there are 2 elections petition. One of them has the evidence.
Okay, fair enough. Aubrey, let's keep this civil.
When you finish.
If there is an election petition, that's what I'm asking for, the evidence.
There are 2 petitions. One is evidence based.
Okay, fair enough. It'll come out. Okay.
I also point out that the recount was streamed live. So Guyanese people saw what happened virtually in every box. But that is passive.
Yes.
I want to come to this question. As far as I know, we were advocates while we were in government for there to be widespread consultation on the budget. And as far as I know, as far as I know, that was done.
Are you on record of calling for consultation with oil?
If I'm on record as what?
Are you on record of making the same call you were making today, which I agree with, by the way, that there should be consultation, collaboration?
But I'm saying to you, not only were we on record, there was consultation with trade unions, virtually every sector.
The opposition was part of the negotiations? Was the opposition part of the negotiation?
Yes, they were invited. Okay. And I think on more than one occasion they did participate.
Okay, then I stand corrected.
Again, we are missing the fundamental thing I'm talking about. I listened to...
Aubrey, I'm sorry to interrupt, but we'll come back to you when we get back, but we have to take a break now for our sponsors.
AllFromOneSupplier.com has all your grocery needs, plus all of your West Indian items. Purchase all your groceries and all your West Indian items from one place and get free delivery to your homes and free shipping. AllFromOneSupplier.com has free deliveries locally in New York and free shipping to all U.S. states. Our shoppers choose the best items, packaged nicely, and delivered to your home. We have all your grocery needs and all your West Indian items, a one-stop shop. So place all your orders on allfromonesupplier.com or call 718-551-3292. That's online at allfromonesupplier.com or call 718-551-3292. Get all your groceries and all your West Indian items from allfromonesupplier.com with free deliveries and free shipping to all U.S. states. Travelspan offers all airlines, such as American, Caribbean, and JetBlue. So let Travelspan compare all airlines and offer you the best fare. Call Travelspan at 718-845-0437 for the lowest deals between New York, Miami, and Guyana. That's Travelspan at 718-845-0437. Call Travelspan in New York at 718-845-0437, Georgetown at 227-1701, or Berbice at 337-4287. In New York, 718-845-0437, Georgetown 227-1701, or Berbice 337-4287, and West Coast Demerara at 269-0140. Let Travelspan book you the best deals for you and your families. Travelspan now has travel and shipping services. Shop online and deliver to Travelspan to handle all of your shipping to Guyana and Trinidad. Travelspan brings 26 years of experience in the travel business. Travelspan will clear your items and have it available at any of our offices in Guyana or Trinidad. So go online and purchase your item, then let Travelspan handle all the shipping. Shop and ship made easy with Travelspan, with offices in New York, Georgetown, Berbice, West Coast Demerara, and Trinidad. Travelspan, serving you with your airlines and shipping needs. Call in New York 718-845-0437, and in Guyana call 227-1701. That's in New York 718-845-0437, and in Guyana 227-1701. And in Trinidad call 672-2060. That's 672-2060.
We are back. We are back on Globespan, and we are discussing will all Guyanese benefit from the promise of the new economy. We have 30 minutes, and so I would like to be very specific. We have a situation in Guyana where everybody is speaking of inclusivity, that opposition should be on boards, etc., etc. This problem is serious because it has an ethnic dimension to it. It's not just that the opposition should be on the board, but the opposition represents in a large measure Afro-Guyanese. So it's a very serious problem, in as much as Guyana is being threatened externally with a border problem. Internally, we are threatened with the dissolution of our country if we implode in inter-ethnic strife. And I do not understand how we could understand that the threat externally is so important that we have to cooperate, but when it comes to the internal, we fall asleep. So I would like to ask you gentlemen two questions. One is very specific. The opposition is saying the government is illegal. The entire world is saying the party of the government won the elections. Okay. How do we get out of that conundrum? Because the government is saying, if you don't recognize this as legitimate, what is the basis? How are we going to begin to dialogue about shared governance, to put it in inverted commas? So I'd like to ask you all, what would you recommend to Mr. Norton as a leader of the PNC, one of the major leaders? And he might very well be General Secretary. He might very well be leader of the PNC. We have another presidential candidate here, Timothy. Probably in 2025, he'll become president of Guyana. So, gentlemen, what do you all recommend? How do we get out of this conundrum? Have I lost you all?
Well, I was waiting to see who you're asking.
Well, any one of you. Let's start with any one of you, gentlemen. Come on. What is the solution to this? And then the second question will be, we will talk about specifically how Guyanese can benefit from the $10 billion I have read that will be coming annually for a couple of years. But let's start with this problem, because unless we resolve this, we are not getting anywhere.
I'll jump in. I'll jump in because I'll be brief.
Go ahead.
I think my recommendation is the opposition recognizes Mr. Ali and let their case play out in the court. One way or another, the court will resolve this, and then you deal with it then. But for now, the country has to move forward. There's almost half the country that voted for the opposition that has no representation at the seat of government right now. And so that would be my recommendation. Simple, but that would be my recommendation.
Well, I would say to you, you're living in false hopes.
Hope? I have no hope, Aubrey. I'm hoping nothing. I'm making no hope. I made a recommendation.
Our people saw the recount, and our supporters are satisfied in their minds that a lot of irregularities occurred. And there is no way we should consider this government as a legitimate.
That's my recommendation. That's not a hope.
I listen to you.
Yeah, but don't make these types of loose statements. It's not a hope.
What is a loose statement?
You tell me I'm living on false hope. That's what you said. What false hope? Paul asked for some recommendations. I made one. You can make yours as well.
The recommendation is impractical if one knows politics and understands politics. Why would we recognize a government when we went through a process? You asked for a recount. Together we had a recount, and you selected what you want and would have left the rest. We are clear in our heads that this is an illegitimate government. The United States State Department report says it's an installed government. Well, they should know. Now, I was saying that there are things that we can do to bridge the gap. I identified some of them. I do not believe, if you're talking about what Timothy is talking about, legislation, we went through that constitutional reform process. And virtually every proposal that was aimed at changing the system ran into a brick wall. Now, having said that, I do believe that much more can be done in terms of budget and a number of other areas that we can begin a process of speaking with each other. But I also want to make the point that the very election system we have is not one that will produce credibility anytime soon. In an article I wrote years ago in a book on conflict resolution, I identify our electoral system as one of the problems in Guyana. And come the next election, you are likely to end up in similar problems because of the nature of the society and the political actors. Now, when one would have thought that the opposition will be a united opposition, my friend Timothy will tell you that their rep work more with the PPP than the opposition. So in some regard, you have the co-option of one person from the opposition to the government for the weakening opposition position. I am convinced, and I repeat, unless there is a change in the political culture, we will have difficulties.
How will that change? Aubrey, how will that change come about?
It probably has to be with a new young generation.
Well, Tim.
Yeah, but Aubrey, are you going to surrender as a leader? You're an outstanding leader.
I'm not surrendering.
I'm going to surrender now, and we have to go to bed and wait until another day.
Could I ask you a question? Could you ask your question?
Yeah.
You tell me, with the present political construct,
yes,
in which political parties fight for domination and control, how you're going to change it? I am saying to you,
the leaders have to change. The leader, look, my brother, look at history. Leaders make a difference. Mandela made a difference.
I agree that leaders make a difference.
Mandela made a difference.
On both sides.
Listen, Paul, Timothy was a candidate in the last election, and we're leaving him out of this discussion. So let me bring it back. Timothy, do you believe the president is illegitimate and the election, the recount results are flawed?
I am sorry that the conversation went in this direction. I'm going to answer you directly. The president is legitimate. He was legitimately elected. The SOPs proved it. APNU themselves, in the words of people like Basil Williams and David Granger, the day after the election said they were fairly held and that they have their SOPs, and the SOPs said they won. They lied to their supporters.
Yeah.
You can't
I've
get
seen
away
the
from that.
SOPs, by the way. I've seen them.
The recount happened, and the recount showed the same thing. But by the time of the recount, APNU had already, oh my goodness, I cannot finish a sentence. APNU had already filed legal proceedings to stop the recount that just days previously their leader had signed on and said they wanted to do. So they knew the end result. But the conversation should not go here in this forum.
Yeah, that's why I said let the
conversation
courts
goes
decide.
here in this forum, and in this regard, I agree with Aubrey. Aubrey has been trying to say, if we're going to talk solutions, let's talk solutions, and we keep politicizing this.
Well, it seems to me that, but Timothy,
and
it
right
seems
now, we have to have a discussion on how to achieve these high-level things we're talking about. This kumbaya, holding hands and agreeing on decisions. I want it to happen, but how will it happen? It is my firm view that, and allow me to interject and say this, Aubrey suggested that the one seat held by Schumann right now, because Schumann goes sometimes and votes along with the government, that somehow weakens the opposition. Now, the APNU folk have demonstrated math is not their strong point. But I really would challenge Aubrey to explain how in Parliament, if you have 31 seats, you are weaker than if you have 32 seats when the government has 33 seats. Because I don't understand that math at all. That is a distraction, some kind of political speech that detracts us from what we should be talking about. Now, to answer your question, Floyd, as long as you have two ethnic-based parties in our society, and only those two parties, one must get 33 or more, and the other must get 32 or less. And therefore, we will have an elected dictatorship or a rigged dictatorship. You cannot solve our problem unless you have an intelligent, hardworking majority opposition. So you need more than two parties. That is my firm view. You see, I have seen the ethnic base of the two parties. And let me say, the individuals in those parties are not racist. And the voters that blindly vote along ethnic lines are not racist. But the end result is race politics. The end result is ethnic politics. And if anyone recognizes that, if any patriotic, hardworking, decent Guyanese recognizes that in Guyana, we vote race, they have to choose to reject both ethnic-based parties and do something else. And that is what I have done. Because by voting for an ethnic-based party, you perpetuate our 50 years of strife. But as soon as you have three parties, you have a possibility that you might have a majority opposition, and then Aubrey can talk about weakening by splitting the opposition, because if the opposition got 33 seats, we can start passing the laws that we need to pass to curtail the control by the government of the purse strings so that hidden decisions are made, such as hiding a signing bonus. Because if that petroleum board was peopled by people like Aubrey as well as people like Jagdeo, then monies passing through under the Petroleum Act would be under both their scrutiny, not just one side. That is what we need.
Aubrey, can I ask you a question?
No,
Aubrey.
I need to be allowed to respond to that.
Yeah, you will respond, but I just want to ask you a quick question to follow. Do you recognize Timothy and Schumann and the other party? Do you recognize them as being legitimate in the Parliament of Guyana? Or are they illegitimate?
The political parties if you ask me if I think Schumann, they got the votes, and when they joined together, they were entitled to the seat, yes.
No, are they legitimate? Should they be sitting in that parliament? Are they legitimate? Are they legitimate representatives
yes.
that voted for them?
Yes. Schumann.
Are your members, are PNC, APNU, AFC members sitting in the parliament legitimate? Yes or no?
In my opinion, the discrepancy is between the APNU, AFC, and the PPP. And I do not believe, having seen the recount, etc., and we have filed a petition that the present parliament reflects the reality of legal votes in Guyana. But I want to go to what...
No. But do you recognize as legitimate the PNC members sitting in parliament, or those people are illegitimate? We should go and throw them out of the parliament.
The question, in my opinion, is a non sequitur. Because I'm saying to you, in my opinion, the two major political parties, the seats that they have to me do not reflect the reality of what the recount showed in terms of how many votes were illegal. And so I accept that, look, a government was imposed and that government exists, and the figures that emerge from that impositions are there. But I want to go to what Mr. Jonas was saying. His solution is the solution that occurred a couple of years ago, where the APNU and the AFC combined, but were not one political party, had the majority. And they proceeded to do just what Mr. Jonas was saying. The result of that was the proroguing of the parliament. Unless we got short memory. So how is that going to be the solution if, when you have these counterbalances, the government of the day, even if they are a minority, can prorogue the parliament? So the solution he is recommending has already been tested and failed. And that is why I am saying we have to look at it and come up with a new system. Anybody following what happened in that period will know the APNU, AFC combined said no to certain elements in the budget. They said no to things that they believe should not pass. And the response to that was not, we will work together and try and find compromise and consensus. The response to it was to prorogue parliament and govern the country without a parliament. That is historical fact. And so if you come now to tell me that a failed approach, in fact, the coalition between the APNU and AFC emerged because it was recognized if you don't have a majority and form the government, you are in deep trouble. And so I don't see that as a solution.
Okay, so we have only a few minutes left, and I would like to pose one last question on each of the panelists to comment on, which was originally the subject of our discussion today. Do you all believe, in light of this discussion and the position of the APNU AFC regarding the current government, that it will impede Guyanese from benefiting from the promise of the new economy? In other words, does this political backward, defective culture and the practice, this status quo continues, will it impede Guyanese from benefiting from the new economy? I would like each one of you to comment, and then we'll close the program because we're coming to an end. We could start with Timothy.
Well, Paul, before I answer that, I want to look at that, imagine the piece of historical fact that Aubrey related. It is true, APNU AFC together had majority in opposition. But I would challenge him to point to one piece of legislation that they proposed to create, to codify an inclusive system in any area where the purse strings are. Central housing and planning is run by a piece of a piece of legislation. All they needed to do is amend it to say opposition must have majority on that board. Public Procurement Commission, Petroleum Commission, the state sectors like NISIL, Guy Oil, GPL, GuyWa. What legislation did those two incompetent parties in their period of time propose in Parliament using their majority to effectuate the kind of inclusivity that now you want to talk about when you're in opposition? That is called historical fiction.
Well, I'm telling
to
you,
answer your question,
fact.
we
are responsible for the procurement.
Were we? I heard you all the way through and didn't interrupt.
I thought you were finished.
To answer your question, Paul.
Yes.
It is not fair to say to APNU now, because you reject the government and the outcome of the elections, a discussion is impossible. They are two separate conversations. APNU can have a discussion without recognizing the legitimacy because, right or wrong, like it or lump it, and I don't like it, they have taken a position on the elections. I don't know why we focus so much on that in this conversation, because that has not moved us one iota forward to reaching solutions. But the two are not incompatible. APNU can have a discussion with PPP right now if the two parties agree to meet. The thing is, such a discussion will produce nothing, because just like 2 years ago, APNU supporters smugly in government were saying, well, we got to talk to them people about 19 fraud charges, this, that, and the other. We don't want them to share governance with us. Right now, the PPP supporters saying the same thing. What we want those riggers for? We don't want them to share governance with us. Because when you're in power, you're smug. And that is our problem. That is our dilemma. That what the APNU supporters were saying 2 years ago, the PPP supporters are saying now. You're happy when you're in power. So they can have a conversation. And it is unfair to suggest you can't have a conversation unless you recognize the government. But the conversation has been fruitless for 50 years and will be fruitless for 50 years once it is those two behemoths continually hurting Guyana and continually fighting each other.
Paul, this is precisely the problem you have when you engage people whose end products are ideas. And what I mean by that, I've heard a lot of lofty discussion, political structure, culture, but I haven't heard any solution today. And this is precisely the problem of politics and politicians. Their end products are ideas. They don't produce anything. I have not heard any tangible 2 or 3 things that could be done today, here and now, that could help people. And while people are excited or fired up about petition and all of that, they have to live today and now. And political rhetoric and lofty political talk doesn't put food on people's table. And so in closing, all of the points that Aubrey raised, I wholly supported them. I wish he had done them when he had the chance.
All I would say to Floyd is, I was making recommendations, and it is you who shifted to politics. From the inception, I wanted this discussion to focus on how Guyanese could benefit. And on every occasion that I was interrupted was with you seeking to make some political point.
I am not, Aubrey. I am not a politician.
Listen to you, didn't I listen to you?
Fair.
In all fairness to Mr. Jonas, he had agreed with me that this program should go in the direction of discussing concrete issues. I came prepared with points on concrete economic and other issues. For instance, I wanted to talk about a program to push small and medium-sized businesses using the resources from oil, because it is well established that small and medium-sized business contribute significantly to the development of an economy. I couldn't go down that road because continuously the attempt was being made to push politics into it. At that point, you had to respond to the politics. I hope that the next time I'm invited to speak on an issue on the economy, the panel is one in which the focus will be on those issues, and he who considers himself to be professional should be professional and not push it down the political road.
But Aubrey, you're the one that started it. You said it's political economy
true.
when I was emphasizing the economics. And then you said you can't do it without the politics. And then you mentioned the discrimination against Linden and we wrote
the discrimination came long after Floyd pushed it. More than 3 times I appealed to let us keep the politics out and let us focus on the things that will cause this country to progress. And
we have a record. We have,
like I said, Legitimacy did agree, but for some reason it was being pushed down that road.
So Aubrey, so that you can be able to have a minute to express your views regarding the subject of today, do you believe that the Guyanese people can benefit or will benefit from the new oil economy? From what you are observing in Guyana today?
I believe the Guyanese people can benefit, but with the present political system, I cannot suggest that there's a guarantee that Guyanese will benefit. I said earlier, based on the history of corruption and domination, I have little or no hope.
So we're back to the politics.
I started this conversation by saying economic decisions are informed by political policy decisions. I suggested in the process that we needed to shift away from the kind of politics we are involved in and try to find consensus on decisions. And I illustrate with the use of a road where geography, economics, and a number of issues should inform it rather than narrow considerations. But, I want to say this. I undertook to come on this program because I was continuously told that there will be a fair and reasonable approach by all sides. I agreed to come to discuss a particular topic, and unfortunately, it was always pushed away from the topic, and therefore, one must not worry when people from the AP and UAFC decline invitation to these programs. From the inception, it was clear that the intention was not a rational discussion on whether the Guyanese people will benefit from the new economy.
No, but what is your opinion? Do you believe they can benefit in?
I've already expressed the opinion that with the present political system and with the present approach, the history of corruption, it is not likely that the majority of the people of Guyana will benefit.
I got it.
An elite and a small group will benefit.
I got it, Aubrey, and I would like to say to you that if we play the tape back, you will see that you have had more time than anyone else on the program to speak. And if you failed to advance your points as a seasoned politician, then you can't blame anyone for that. And I say this in good spirit of knowing you since the 1980s. I know that you may one day become the leader of your political party. You may become probably the general secretary. And I hope that you will take the initiative to introduce a new political culture, the very point that you are making.
I have always worked for a new political culture.
Wonderful. Always. So we have come to the end of the program, and we look forward to, even though Aubrey has reservations about coming on the program. I hope he will come again, and I hope when I'm next in Guyana we could have a conversation. But it's quite evident that currently in Guyana we are faced with some serious problems of COVID, of crime, of the border problem, of joblessness, and so forth. And it is high time that we begin to put the people's business on the table and move forward. If we are going to get $10 billion a year as an income to the treasury of the country, one would hope that both the government, the opposition, civil society, or the citizens on the road will come up with ideas to lobby, to pressure, and to hold the government's feet to the fire to ensure that the resources and the income that will come will benefit all Guyanese. So I am going to maintain an optimistic view with the hope that the political parties in the country, the citizens of the country, civil society in the country will push forward to ensure that Guyanese benefit all Guyanese, regardless of race or class, from the revenues that will come. And I hope that the oil sector will impact on the other sectors like agriculture and so forth in a transformational way so that we could develop a self-sustaining economy and not just an economy dependent on another raw material like gold, and now it will be oil. So until next time, thank you gentlemen very much for a very good interaction on the subject that we were discussing, and I look forward to the next time for us to continue to deepen our views and our recommendations for Guyana. Thank you.
Thank you both.